You may now clutch your pearls because I'm doing it again, as I said I would. The conversation around religion continues. And as a matter of fact, we are going to be discussing when religion goes wrong, and naturally, we are focused on when religion goes wrong for women. Hello and welcome to Ladies Listen Up. I am your host, Gwendolyn G.R. Houston Jack. So, religion. Okay, I already know that there are people who are going to hear the idea of even talking about it and turn off this episode, and that's okay. I'm perfectly fine with that. Understand that as a person who likes to talk to other people and really get into why we do what we do, this show was created to have a safe space for unapologetic conversations. We are going to discuss all the things. And this is not saying that you now need to look at everything you've ever known and question it. That is not the conversation. Trust, my relationship with the Lord above is strong and tight. Never question. But of course, I didn't put my faith in man, so that probably explains why I feel the way I feel. So I am so excited that we have someone who is brave enough to share their experience in this conversation today. And so I want to welcome our special guest, and it is Peggy McCartha. Welcome, Peggy. Welcome. How are you?
I am great. Thanks for having me on today.
So before I get started, I want to make sure I introduce you to all the people who probably have, well, they may or may not have heard about you because you've been around for a little bit. You have a well versed biography, as I like to say. So let me just tell the people about Peggy McCartha real quick. She is a certified professional photographer with over 30 years of experience. Okay, expert, we'll go ahead and call it. She is also a creator. She created the Headshot Strategist certification program. She also has Time Builders Community. She is a podcaster, a motivator, an empower, an activist. And now I get to the good stuff. She's the wife, mom, grandma, LGBTQ plus ally, lymphedema awareness spokesperson, and human civil rights advocate. My goodness, welcome, Peggy McCartha.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'm also a friend of G. I'm like a big fan of yours. So it's an honor to be here.
Let me say this before we get into this conversation. Let me say this that it is it's empowering. It really is for you to come on and share your experience because I am aware. People talk about, you don't want to touch this with a 10-foot pole. I get it. Religion can be ugly, it can be sticky, and people can be black and white about it. But the fact of the matter is, we are past due for conversations about a lot of what we do in our society, right? Politics, money, relationships, the whole nine yards. We're past it. So thank you for coming here. You're going to share what you feel comfortable sharing. So I want to make sure that that is clear to everybody. And we now get to dive into when religion goes wrong. All right. So let me just start with something very basic, right? Because I want people to get an idea as to who you are, right? This is who you are. So just give us a quick review of your religious upbringing. Tell us about religion in your household. I know in last season, I shared that my mother is a minister, and I also shared when things went kind of wonky for me. So if you will, just give us a little bit of your background.
Sure. I grew up in a very small farming community, like 900 people in our town. So very small community. And my parents found religion when I was 2 years old. I had older siblings, two sisters that are 9 and 11 years older than me. So they were, preteen, teenage when my parents found religion. But I, pretty much my whole life grew up in a very religious home. We, like I said, small town, so there was a church on every every street corner. And originally, as a child, we kind of flopped back and forth from the Baptist church to the
Mm,
Methodist church.
mhm.
But before we would go to church in the mornings, my mom would get me dressed, because you have to wear a dress and the little black shoes with the leotards, the whole thing
I
every
do.
Sunday. And I had long, long straight hair, and so it was always, but she would set me in front of the TV, and before we went to church, I had 2 hours of church TV as a child. So I listened to Kenneth Copeland Ministries
Mhm.
and I just went blank. Oh my gosh. Anyway, here in California, I totally went blank on the other evangelical minister that I'd listened to. And then we would go to the Methodist church or the Baptist church, whoever, whatever preacher they happened to like at that time. And that went on until I was about 10 years old. And then a neighboring town had I guess, an outreach that they started on Monday
Mhm.
evenings. It was an evangelical faith, holy roller type of a thing. And so we started going to that on Monday nights. And then my parents helped to establish a church in our town. So I was literally just always raised in the
Mm,
church.
mhm.
Couldn't listen to secular music because that was devil music. Couldn't do, never went to a school dance. I worked a lot and I was at church. I was either working or at church.
Mm,
Now, I was also, I played the drums and loved rock and roll. I mean, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, so I loved that.
mhm.
And so I had to play Christian music and sneak around for any other kind of music because any other music was, the devil. And even as a kid, I always questioned, even though I really wanted to be a good girl, I wanted to
Yeah.
be, a little Christian girl, I always questioned, why, people used to say Elvis Presley was evil. Now, why do you say his music is fine? Like,
Mhm,
why did, when you were a kid, this was evil. Now you're telling me I can listen to it. So I always question things
mhm,
like that.
mhm.
And I think I drove everyone crazy because I did question, even though everything about me wanted to go full in on this, I always needed to know why and how, and that's ultimately probably what saved me.
Here's what's funny about music, now that you mention it. I know for us, Prince was not allowed. Mother never actually said it, but it was just one of those where you just really didn't play him. Michael Jackson was fine. He was safe, right? The Jackson 5 was safe. Prince, on the other hand, pushed all the boundaries and is like, no, we're not. We're not doing any of that. And then, of course, when I got older and could buy my own music, I was like, oh, okay. Like, what's the big deal? What's the big deal? Like, I don't even understand. But different times, different things. But yes, the whole idea of secular music and yeah, we really could do a whole show on just all the
A
things you're
whole
not
show
supposed
a
to
whole
do.
show of that. When
All the
when I
things.
came to the realization that Stryper was literally stealing the good music and putting new words to it, I was like,
Right.
"Wait a minute." But yeah.
There's so much room for that, but it's like, okay, let me just make sure we stay here. But same thing, it was this whole idea of these rules. Like, where did these rules come from? Like, my grandmother would say, well, you're not supposed to cut your hair. That's in the Bible, and a woman's not supposed to. I was like, where is that? Are you serious right now? Like, that doesn't even make sense. Like, none of it even makes sense. I'm like, but wait, what? You shouldn't play cards. You can't do this, and you can't drink alcohol. It's like, but they did somebody turn water into wine? I could have sworn that's one. That's in there. So you can't tell me that we can't drink.
So my dad's grandparents were Quaker Mennonite ministers.
Mm,
So my dad was raised in a Quaker church,
mhm,
Mennonite. So no makeup, no nail polish, no piercings, no, women had long hair, women were submissive, the
mhm,
whole thing.
mhm,
Now, when my sisters were never allowed to wear makeup and, anything, but on the school bus, they would put their makeup on
Sneak it.
and like, don't tell mom and dad. And then, after school, wash their face and come home. But by the time I came around, I think my parents had just they just didn't care anymore about that.
Mhm.
But it was very prevalent, like how a woman, I always had long hair, and at some point when I cut my hair, I think I was about 16, my
Mhm.
dad did not speak to me for 3 days. He came in to sit down for dinner and saw that I had short hair, and he put his place sitting down. He got up and he left, and he would not even utter a word to me for 3 days. He was so angry about hair.
Hair. Well,
Hair.
that's the perfect segue, because I want to talk about like you as a young adult. Did the beliefs you had early on impact any life decisions you made as you were coming into your own? Like, so you were going like from the teenage years, but your sisters are sneaking on the makeup and whatnot until you're becoming like the 20 something. Did those beliefs impact your life decisions and how you felt about yourself?
100%.
Mm.
Every decision.
Mhm.
I, like I said, grew up in a small town, and I knew what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to be a photographer. I knew I wanted to leave the small town. And I didn't date anyone in high school
Oh.
because there was no way. I mean, I'd seen so many people, they date someone, they get stuck in this town. And I remember my mom coming to me when I was a senior in high school, and she was like, "Are you a lesbian? I'm going to pray that devil out of you because you should be engaged by now." I'm 17 years old, and she's angry that I'm not engaged. Um, Anyway, I did get out of that town. I moved to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and went to Rhema Bible College, Kenneth Hagin's Bible College. And it's funny as I'm saying these things, because please know that this is exclusive. This is the first time I've ever spoke publicly about any of this.
Aw.
Most of the people that know me don't know this part of my life,
Mm.
because there's so much trauma connected to it.
Mhm.
But I did go to Rhema Bible College while I was interning with a photographer to learn photography and how to run a photography business. So I was doing that,
Mhm.
and I met a boy, and, we had sex. And that was it. Like, we obviously have to get married. There's like no question, because we're in sin. And I'm basically like blacklisted for anybody in the whole world. Nobody's ever going to want to touch me or look at me because I have had
Mhm.
sex. I have fornicated, and I am now dirty and bad and evil.
Mm.
And very soon after that, he started physically abusing me, physically.
Oh.
And I still married him.
Ugh.
2 years of abuse before we were married, because that was my punishment for being a sinner. I felt I deserved that
Mm.
because I let him, so therefore I deserved this. So after we got married, then he ended up going to Bible school, and we moved to the Navajo Indian Reservation, and we worked with children and teenagers. And we had a really big ministry there, and we were under the biggest televangelist ministry in the world.
Mm.
We were kind of like, we called him our dad. He was our spiritual dad. Our kids called him
Mm.
grandpa. And we were, not just under the ministry, but we were in the family. We were, really, really highly involved. And no one knew that I was being physically abused. I mean, I had, I think, 8 broken ribs.
God.
I
Mm.
had been left unconscious, left alone, and woke up, hours later by myself in a pool of blood. Like, I mean, these things were happening on a regular basis. Meanwhile, he's out on the pulpit telling people, how to live. And so many years. Well, let me go back and add this, because I do want to bring this
Mm.
up. When I was only 19 years old, our nephew started staying with us, and then eventually we adopted him.
Mhm.
And so that obviously my oldest, but not by birth.
Mhm.
And when he was about 14, 15, he liked to shave his legs and wear girls' clothes, and he got caught. And it was I honestly don't know his sexuality or his gender identity because no one ever asked.
Mm.
No one ever asked. We just like, you are a sinner. We're going to pray this out of you. This is just terrible. Like nobody can know that you're an evil. And he just wanted to be a good kid. He
Mhm.
he loved
Mhm.
God. He loved the church. He loved all of this. But he was not allowed to express himself at all.
Mm.
And this went on, and I was really struggling with this because
Mm.
being raised in a small community, being raised in a church, being always surrounded by this type of thinking,
Mhm.
and then to have somebody in my family that I'm like, this kid isn't trying to sin. This kid is just this is who he is and what is going on. And so that's when I started really questioning, like,
Mm.
what is going on here. And in 2002, early 2002, um, was the worst abuse to date.
Mhm.
He actually took a rifle and shoved it down my throat and said he was going to blow my brains out, and then turned it on him and said, "Oh, you want me to do this?" And then instead took the not the barrel, the arm piece or whatever,
Mhm.
and hit me in the face and dislocated my skull, broke and dislocated my skull, gave me a severe concussion and whiplash. And about that same time, he had punched our oldest. And that was the first time he'd ever been physical with the kids.
Mm.
And then he, just walking down the hall, shoved our 8-year-old on his butt. And I was like, that's it. Like, I've got to get out of here, or me and the kids are actually going to die. Like, I need to leave. So I called this big minister who, I thought of as family. And I said, hey, I need you to know this is what's going on.
Mhm.
And I'm actually scared for my life, and I have to leave. And I just need you to know that I'm leaving. And he said, no, you can't leave. We make too much money off of the Navajo reservation mission.
Mm.
You can't go. And I said, but and he says, oh, we'll pray for him. It's fine. We'll pray for him. I said, I've been praying for him for 13 years now. I need to go. And he said, no, you can't. He's like, I'll tell you what, I'll give you some money. It'll be a private bank account. You can have your own money. And and I was like, money, what is, I'm afraid for my life. I don't need money. And he said, you cannot leave. You are like the person for this.
Mhm.
People
Mhm.
love you, they love your energy. You cannot go. And I was like, oh, well, I can. And he's like, if you do, you will lose everything, and we will ruin your name. And I was like, okay. So I loaded up the kids and moved to Southern California. And we lived in a 28-foot trailer in a trailer court, in a like a
Mhm.
campground
Mhm.
trailer, for a long time. And that's when I was really questioning everything. My dad always told me when I was a kid, he would say, God gave you a brain. Think about it. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
And, I think that's why I did always question things.
Mhm.
But it was like everybody that I thought loved me and cared about me, and the message that I thought I was bringing to help people, I was like, is this just a game for money?
Yeah.
Is this like,
Yeah.
what do you mean? Why, I'm a dollar sign to someone? Like I just couldn't fathom, because I wasn't doing what I was doing for money. I honestly
Mhm.
believed
Mhm.
what I was being told.
Mhm.
But I think in hindsight, the big red flags are: don't question the prophet of God.
Yeah.
Don't question, you should always question everyone. Jesus questioned Jesus questioned the Pharisees. Like,
Yeah.
you should question everything. And at any time, if anyone is saying, like, oh, just trust me, this is what God showed me. Like,
Yeah.
no, no.
Let me, let me, wow. It's a lot to wrap your head around, right? Because this isn't like, I know we've seen documentaries. People have talked about what goes on beyond behind those closed doors, right? Like we've seen those documentaries and things, but to have you recount the abuse in your household and how you, like a lot of others, have sought out a resolution and help, and then to be told, well, we'll just pray about it because you're like, I've been praying for 13 years, man. Like, I'm not saying that. It's one of those where you have to say, this cannot be the life that the good Lord has chosen for us, for me to just sit here and do this, right, and experience and have my kids experience it too. Like, this cannot be it. So I want to switch really quick, and I'm going to let us get into this very last topic here, because I do want to investigate the life that we are living religiously. And you mentioned how your father said, hey, does that make sense? And that we should question. So this is one of those where I'm going to say do the work, but for all the viewers, you have to decide what that work looks like. Okay, so clearly I heard the turning point for when it went wrong for you. And there were some signs we followed because this is the letter of the law. And there was a point where you said, okay, this cannot continue. It can't. So the question for you is this, because we are not advising viewers to walk away from their current religious beliefs and everything they've ever known, not asking it whatsoever. That is not it. That is not what we're about. We are about giving people who may be in a place of question mark. I'm having a question mark moment right now. This is what that conversation is, because we all have our own experience with whatever church and everything else, and we're respecting that. So this is not some sort of, I'm going to advise you to go against. No, I'm not. I don't have time for that. But for those who currently have a question mark about their current state of religious belief, or their church they're attending, or something they may have been told, what advice do you have from your own experience? What would you tell those people?
Faith without works is dead. God never was, I prayed for protection. I prayed for all these things for years, but nothing ever happened until I stood up and made a change in my life. And I think that even though I left religion, I don't think I left society's idea of religion, because there are, I believe, laws that apply to the universe, the universal laws, and they're true. But part of that is that you have to get up and do something. When somebody says, oh, I'm going to pray for you, I'm like, okay, go ahead. Like, your prayers aren't going to change anything in my life. Because most of the time when people say they're going to pray for me, they're not. It's just like a popular thing to say, like, and B, I have control over my life and the direction that it goes. And so, I am the one that has to stand up and make that decision. Do I stay here? Or do I stand up and do I go in a way that I'm going to be able to live a happy, fulfilled, prosperous, amazing life? Or do I stay here in the dark and continue to take all of this on because someone else told me to. So I think my advice would be to realize that it is your life. It is your life that God gave you to live. So go live it and make the life that you want, and be happy, because it's okay. You can be happy. You can have a good life. You are not inherently bad. You are not a sinner. You are not evil. You are a human living a human experience. And sometimes bad things happen and sometimes good things happen. But you are a human living a human experience. And it's really a cool experience. So go out and live it.
That's great advice. And I couldn't help but think when you were saying, when people say, I'll pray for you, I immediately think about all of the mass shootings we've had in our society, so much so that, you know, I don't believe I'm desensitized, but when it happens, I'm not also in shock and awe anymore. And when people who can make a change and can take action simply say, we're sending our thoughts and prayers, I'm like, clearly you're not, because your thoughts and
Mm-mm.
prayers can only go so far. Perhaps if you change some laws, we might get some real difference here, right? Some real change. So I understand that whole point of people just say it because it sounds like the thing to say in a certain moment, but it like, is it really there? Is the truth, like, are you really sending up a couple of prayers but for this person, or is it just, oh, I'll send prayers and I'll pray for you and I'll, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I get what you're saying. Now I do believe that there are people who sit down and send up as many as they can, and then you have like your politician who's like, we're sending our thoughts and prayers to the family of the parents who have lost their 9-year-old and 8-year-old because, you know, let me
Well,
not do that.
and also,
Let me not
yeah.
do that. You know, I just
Well,
say
sometimes
it.
also when people send their prayers or say they're going to pray for you, it's not that they're praying for you. It's a type of manipulation.
Mm,
Like,
mm,
hey, you aren't good. I'm going to pray that you'll be better
yeah,
and do the things that I decided that God wants you to do.
yeah,
Believe the way I believe, and if you don't believe the way I believe, then you're inherently a sinner. And so I'm going to pray for you, and that's just manipulation. That's
yeah,
literally the definition of taking the Lord's name in vain.
yeah. I never thought about that. Like, yeah, but that's a really good point. That's a really good point. Yeah, if you think about the context behind the statement, it does shift the way it's like, wait a minute. Hmm. But this is why we invited you here, Peggy. I got to tell you, uh, man, you know, and it's one of those places where you're thinking, clearly 30 minutes. we it it's not enough to get into where we might want to go in the future. But I cannot help but thank you again for just even sharing what you have shared today. Like that's huge. And I'm, for all the viewers who are watching, I'm sure they're like, okay, I've probably had a thought or two, or I've experienced something similar, and I'm just trying to figure out like how to navigate these waters. Very much so. So Peggy, thank you so much for giving us this time, and it's clearly we need to investigate some more, perhaps in the future. But for those who are wanting to investigate your photography program, or maybe even connect with you, how can our viewers connect with you?
Well, thank you. First of all, I wanted just to, in the beginning of the show, you said time builders. It's time benders, and I know it was just a slip up of
Yeah,
the tongue because you're
clearly.
part of the time benders, so I knew But yeah, we have an amazing group of professional photographers that reach around the world, and if you are in the LA area, I would love to have you come into my studio and let me take your headshots. But either way, I would love for you to set up a chat with me. So you can go to headshotstrategist.com // let's chat and get on my calendar. I would love to meet and talk to you.
Sweet. Again, thank you so much. And yes, I am part of the time benders community. Sometimes the tongue does what it does.
I am always right there with you. I always say the random things.
Oh my goodness. So again, thank you all for tuning in today. We cannot thank Peggy enough for being so brave to share her story. And I'm going to say this for the last time, and I know people are like, it's not that. Yes, it is. When you decide to be vulnerable and share a part of your story that, as Peggy has shared with us, has never shared before, that is not an easy thing. It is by no means easy. So we are not going to even pretend that that is not a huge step and something that is very brave, right? So I want to thank her for that. And as I always say, give yourself the space and grace to grow and learn. See you guys soon.